became a CLFA finalist for Book of the Year, has had a #1 bestseller on Amazon and 2 #1 new releases. He writes both fiction and nonfiction and is currently completing a trilogy that he ran on Kickstarter. So welcome to the call, Adam.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. I have to tell my listeners that I met you through Twitter. And when we first started to connect, I kind of was confused because your Twitter handle is Prometheus. And so I would love to hear why it's Prometheus and not Adam Lane Smith.
So I actually work where I'm a practicing psychotherapist. And I've worked in a lot of different types of therapy. One was corrections with death penalty cases, gang violence. So I don't use my actual name really online very much. It's there. It's on my website. But when I have my personal social media where I share things about family, I tend to just not use my name so no one can explicitly search me out. If they find me, they find me.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And you do a really good job because I had no idea that you were a therapist.
Well, I try.
Okay, but what I did notice, and the thing that caught my attention, was how productive you are as a writer, as an author. So I'd like to talk about that first.
Great.
So tell us about your productivity, how much you write and what you're writing.
Oh boy. Well, for the last 3 years, I've been able to write 1 day a week. So I work 2 jobs. One is as a therapist. I commute. I also have 2 very small children. And in the middle of all of that, I try to write my books. It's been 1 day a week, only on Saturdays, only from 6 a.m. until maybe 2 or 3 in the afternoon. That's been it. And I managed to complete several books that way. In the space of a year, I managed to complete maybe 3 or 4 books in 1 year that way. And it was slow and painful. Recently, I managed to jump up to actually writing 3 or 4 days a week, but in my spare time, in breaks, on lunch hours and whatnot. So in a given week now, I try to turn out about 20,000 words, and I try to edit about 18 to 20,000 words. So with my full-time job, with commuting, with 2 small kids, my wife and everything, I still managed to get about 40,000 words done between writing and editing per week.
I mean, that is just phenomenal. And, to anybody who's saying they don't have the time, to anybody who's saying that they don't have the time to write, I mean, should be incredibly inspirational. How old are your kids?
Well, my son just turned 3, and my daughter just turned 1 and a half, I think now.
Oh my God, really young kids.
Right. I started writing when my son was born, and my very first child. So learning to change diapers, learning to wipe vomit off of my shirt in such a way that it looks sort of presentable before I run to work. And at the same time, trying to learn the craft of writing from absolute scratch. I had no idea what I was doing.
So what made you make that switch from doing it like once a week to that new system where you're, catching an hour here and an hour there, and which works better, or does it matter?
A big piece of being able to do it during the week is that I use dictation software. I have a program on my phone called Dragon Anywhere that allows me to dictate. If I'm sitting in my office for 20 minutes, I can whip out my phone and dictate 20 minutes worth of writing. The human brain can really process something like 150 words per minute when you're speaking. Most people can't really achieve that when they're writing. It's much harder. And dialogue is actually much simpler when you're speaking it out loud because you can actually hear when it sounds too formal or too appropriate. It becomes much easier, so cleaning up the dialogue is much better. Just having those accessibilities like that has made all the difference. Being able to utilize my phone instead of this mentality that I have to carry my laptop with me to work, that I can only write on my laptop, that I can only write on my home computer. Using those accessibility pieces and being willing to put down 500 words in a quick lunch break. Gathering that 500 words 3-4 times a day, that has made a big difference.
Wow. How do you keep your thinking straight so that you can do it in such a short amount of time?
Well, I have a very organized outlining process. I start off with, I just make sure I outline, and it's not to the obsessive levels that some people might think. My outlines only take me maybe 2 hours per outline to really fully outline. I start off a couple questions of what's going to happen, how do I want the story to progress, who are some of the main players. I start off with the antagonist and their goals first to determine what's going to drive 3/4 of my book. And then I build the protagonist goals off of that and kind of show how the antagonist goals are going to conflict with the protagonist's other goals. That tends to do it for me. And then I go through just point by point and I just write a short 3 or 4 sentence paragraph for each scene about what's going to happen, setting details, the cast of characters that are there, a couple action points for what's going to happen. Maybe if I'm so inspired, a snippet of dialogue that sounds kind of cool. I throw all of that then into Evernote and I run with it through the week. In Evernote, I'll have a breakdown of all 30 or 35 scenes, whatever it might be, for that book. And I just look at it every once in a while. When I've got a scene coming up, I pop open Evernote. I look at my upcoming scene chart. I say, oh, I've got this scene coming up. What would be something fun to throw into that scene? If I just get 2 minutes, well, that might only be 100 words, but if I get 2 minutes, I can throw that open and start daydreaming a little bit about what my next scene could look like. I do that 2-3 times, and by the end of the time, when I'm ready to start writing, I've got that daydreaming locked in. I've got a couple cool pieces that I can chain off of and connect, and it goes great.
That's awesome. What about for nonfiction?
Nonfiction, well, to be honest with you, it's almost the same. When I write nonfiction, I use much the same idea. I daydream. That's kind of a poor term, I suppose. But I sit there and I think of what would I like to say in this chapter? What are 2, 3, 4 main sentences I would like to throw in here that I can then connect the dots to? I have this cool line I have here. I have this cool explanation of this feature. I'd like to hit this point. And then you find out, okay, how do those weave together? And then you just write it and connect them. It makes a lot of sense when you do it. It sounds kind of weird when you're sitting here thinking about it, but you have to maximize your spare minutes in the day. A lot of us think we don't have time, but you have plenty of time at the end of the day to sit and play on Facebook, to play solitaire, to watch Netflix and zone out. We have all this time that is just, we have time vampires throughout our lives. And if you can learn to maximize your efficiency on your day, you will get so much more done.
So you mentioned the weirdness. So I want to ask you, how do you come up with such weird ideas for your stories?
Well, the last fiction book that I published was Maxwell Cain Burrito Avenger, about a cop who gets fired for doing his job. So he goes on a killing spree and kills a whole group of criminals out of revenge for his burrito, which is just about as weird as you can get. It was just... I take a couple things that other people find fun, and then I smash them together and find ways that they might actually fit. So a cool revenge story. I had just watched John Wick #1. A cool revenge story where a guy gets hurt or upset and decides to take down the entire mafia out of revenge. In John Wick, that's his dog. In my story, that's a burrito. People also love burritos. People love revenge stories. Smash them together, and this is what you get.
So it's the whole thing about creativity is taking two ideas and putting them together in a new way. That is what creativity is. Yeah.
Correct. If you find something that appeals to a wide enough audience and find a second thing that audience also enjoys, but is maybe a little bit audience adjacent so that you can pull in a second audience and then smash them together and just overdo the hype when you talk about it, people will eat it up. People love it. I did a Kickstarter for my newest series, knights in plasma armor running around in a post-apocalyptic wasteland in power armor with plasma swords, fighting demons, riding motorcycles, blowing things up. You smash a bunch of things together, and then you just point out the fun parts of each of those genres. If you don't know what they are, ask someone who enjoys that genre what the fun parts are, and they'll tell you, like I just did there. That's what's your 2 or 3 favorite things about post-apocalyptic fiction? What are your 2 or 3 favorite things about revenge stories? They'll tell you. And then you grab those and you do the marketing off of that.
Nice. It's so fun to talk to authors and hear the different processes that people go through and how they come up with stuff. I love it. So do you ever get into perfectionism like many authors?
My first book took me 3 years to write.
Yeah.
And recently I took, in the space of 10 consecutive days, I wrote one of my most recent books. Start to finish, 10 consecutive days. My next book after that was even fewer days than that. So, yes, perfectionism was a huge problem for me. I think it's a problem for most first-time authors. When I get questions on my blog, when I get questions on social media, it's usually How am I supposed to get through this? I can't bring myself to finish my first draft. It's all so trash. So it's such awful wording. Why can't I do this? How do I get? The problem is that they're not trusting their process. Maybe they don't even know what the process is. A lot of first time authors think that if they edit as they go,
Oh,
yes, exactly. You already make the noise. We know if you edit as you go,
the worst. Yeah.
exactly, you will never, ever finish.
Right.
You're going to spend all your time redoing what you have already done.
Right.
What I tell authors, I try to liken this to, it's a craft, right? We work a
Hmm.
craft. I try
Hmm.
to liken it to pottery. So a potter throws a big lump of clay on the table. And as I'm talking about this analogy, you will discover I'm not a potter. So I'm probably going to do a lot of things wrong.
Uh-huh.
But they
Uh,
throw this big lump of clay on the table, and then they begin molding and shaping it, right? They have their little spinny deal, or the spinning thing that makes
right.
it,
Right.
right? These are technical terms. The spinny deal wiggles the
Hmm.
thing around, and they have to try to shape the clay as they go. And there's processes, of course, as they go through that. Even there's the big chunks they take off. There's the smaller. They refine it down, then they heat it. They have a process they follow. We authors also have a very similar process, but we cannot go out and just purchase clay. Our first draft is us creating that clay on the table.
Hmm.
When a potter throws that clump of clay on the table, they've got it from someone. Someone harvested it. Someone got that clay for them. Our first draft is making that clay. You are not shaping your draft when you're writing it. You are dumping a mass of ugly product on a table. That's what the first draft is. The editing is where you actually make that draft into a book. You and I both know that because that's what we do. But first
Right.
time authors get stuck in this trap of thinking, I have to have a book by the end of my first draft. No,
Hmm.
all you have to do is have a mass of usable material on your table. That's all. As long as it's generally usable and you can rewrite sentence by sentence, at least you finished it.
Right. And when you do an outline first, like you've mentioned, it just makes it a lot easier to then put the stuff in a way that is not going to be like just a mess.
Right.
In other words, it's like you have that general mass, like you're saying, but at least each section has that mass and it's organized in some way, hopefully.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's all it is you want it to be
Yeah.
recognizable so you can use it.
Right, right. So, how do you finish a draft?
Like I said, trust the process. I write the
Hmm.
entire first draft, and then I tell myself I'm going to immediately dive into editing. And then I look at it for the first day when I sit down, and I just can't bring myself to because I'm burned out. So then I make myself take a day or two off. Then I come back and I actually start editing. And I go through and I clean up for the first editing pass. I just clean
Hmm.
up the absolute mess. When I
Yeah.
say, this is horrible, I really wrote this, I clean up those sentences piece by piece. Maybe I fix up sentences so it's not just subject, verb, subject, verb, subject. Ted went over here, then
Hmm.
he went over there, then he went over here. Maybe I'll vary the sentence structure a little. First draft, first pass of the editing, I don't even really worry about typos too much. You're just you're shaving off the big chunks of clay. You're
Hmm.
just making it smaller and actually look like a bowl in some form. Um, so just shave off the big chunks and fix a little bit. Then I do a second editing pass and I go through and say, okay, I'm going to actually make this look like someone past the second grade wrote it. So I'll add bigger words and clean up dialogue and make things a little bit more polished. Third editing draft, I actually proofread. And I say, okay, this is my third draft. I'm going to proofread the heck out of it. I'm just going to make sure everything is beautiful. At the end of the third proofread, the third draft there, maybe I'll even proofread it twice. I send it to beta readers. They send it
Hmm.
back. I completely disregard everything they told me. And
I'm
no,
laughing because I've done that too at times, but
well,
I've
of
also had
course.
people do a really fabulous editing job.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes
Absolutely.
people will just edit it for you.
That is the truth.
Yeah.
Um, and then so I'll do a fourth edit and take some of their ideas into consideration. Usually
Hmm.
targeted rewrites might happen at that point. Okay,
Hmm.
every beta reader hated this character because she was so shallow. I need to add some depth to this character. Everyone loved this guy, so he needs another scene, whatever it might be. Um, targeted rewrites in those moments. Then I ship it to a professional editor. So that'll be the fourth editing pass. Ship it
Hmm.
to a professional editor. They edit it for me. They send it back. I do a fifth editing draft. So I do a fifth run through. Then once that's done, I do 2 or 3 proofreading passes. So by the time
Wow.
this is done, yep, I have read my book 8 times. And it says exactly what I want to say it to the best of my current ability. That's why I don't worry about my first draft, because I'm going to read this thing 8 times anyway. I got to get it done or I'll never, ever, ever publish anything.
Right. Well, you said, you talked about how everybody loves it or everybody doesn't like this thing or that thing.
Mhm.
And, I'm very grateful that I learned that very early on because I was in the music business for 20 years.
Yes, that teaches
And
you a lot.
yeah, and when you take your songs to A&R, I mean, everybody has an opinion about it.
Mhm.
So, and also, like what you were saying too, is like if we wrote the song and there was this one word in the song that every A&R person said they didn't like that word,
Mm.
you know?
Yep.
So eventually we did change it as much as I hated to. I can't
Yep.
remember what it was now, but yeah, I just hated to change it, but I did.
Right.
But when you get a whole bunch of different opinions and everybody has an opinion about different things, then that's when I ignore it.
My very first book, I had a professional author read it and tell me that my main character was
Mhm.
just about worthless, and I needed to remove my main character from the story and completely rewrite everything from a secondary character's perspective. And I thought about it, and I said, "Well, they actually know what they're talking about. They're a published author, and I'm just some schmuck." And
Right.
I decided, no, I think I'm going to keep it. I like this character. It went on, and it was a finalist for Book of the Year. And people write
Mhm.
in with comments about how much they just adore that character.
Yeah,
Um,
you're never going to appeal to everybody. You have
Correct.
to listen to your gut, but you also have to learn how to sort of, have some sort of screening process in your own mind.
Yes. Yeah. Now, if everyone had told me they all hated the character, like with yours, with that one word, yeah, that 100% problem means a problem.
Right, exactly.
But 1 or 2, nah, don't let 1 or 2 little opinions bother you. That's why you get a
Yeah.
good selection of 5 or 6 beta readers.
Yeah. So tell us more about the book of the year. How did that come about?
How did I win book? How did I almost win book of the year? Or how did I write the
Well,
book?
first you had to, did you submit something somewhere? I mean, how did it
Oh,
how did,
I don't even think I did. Some people nominated me for the
ah,
Conservative Libertarian Fiction Alliance Award, and they nominated my book, and they just loved it so much. And
mhm,
I said I was blown away that people would love my book that much, especially my first book. And it
mhm.
went through the process, and I kept going through the process, and I kept going through, and I just was flabbergasted that I actually made it to a finalist with some really big quality authors that were in that. So I lost out to one guy, that a great author that I respect very much. So can't really
Mhm.
feel too bad about
Yeah, no, it's a great honor.
this.
It's a great
Is
honor. So congratulations.
well, thank you.
Um, and I've interviewed enough authors now to know that there's a common theme where the first book for a lot of authors is their best book or does really, really well,
Well,
and then on subsequent books they're trying to figure out, what to write about because now, okay, they had a book and now maybe a publisher wants another one or they get the bug and they want to write more, but they've like had years to think about that first one, you know.
yes, that is true. You get years and years and years to agonize over the first, and then
Yeah,
people keep writing comments saying, "Well, it's not as deep as the first book," and you're thinking,
right,
"Well,
right.
yeah, I spent 3 years, day and night, adding
Yeah.
tiny pieces."
Yeah. And also creativity, like again, in the music business, I mean, like when I got a Grammy nomination and after I got it, my publisher said, "Oh, can you write me another one just like that one?" I'm like, "No, no, I can't. They're all
Oh,
different. They're all from inspiration. They're all
oh
from
man,
emotion. Everyone's
just
different."
just copy exactly, but just slightly different, so we can make more money off of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh boy.
So it's creativity is an interesting thing, but yeah, first books, if you spend the time and you do what you said and really make them polished, they really usually do quite well. If
Yes,
you're on
okay.
to market them.
Well,
But anyway,
that's a little depressing. I guess I can quit writing now.
no, 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 no. I don't mean that, but I'm
Uh,
just saying I've just seen a pattern of that where I have seen
now that I could
people say that to me that their
that,
first did really, really well.
that I could say actually. I've never thought about it that way, but we do have so much time with our first one. That does
Yeah.
make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And just for those people who are feeling depressed about that, that was not the case with me. My first book
Well,
was definitely not my best book.
well, good
So,
for you. Good for you.
yeah, mine have definitely gotten better over time, but I'm not writing fiction.
See, so
So I,
everyone should aim to write their worst book first, and don't worry about how the quality is.
whatever works,
There
whatever
you go.
works.
Right.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you'd like to add? Any closing thoughts here or anything else we haven't covered that you'd like to cover?
Well, let me think.
Oh, I know what else I wanted to ask you.
Oh, go for it.
You said you completed your. Wait a minute. Let me do that again because I'll take that part out. One another thing I wanted to ask you was about Kickstarter. So you said you're writing a trilogy and that you ran it on Kickstarter. So tell us about that.
Right. So this is actually the second writing project that I've run on Kickstarter. The first one, Burrito Avenger, ran. I think I got something like $2,200 or $2,500 for that, and that covered my costs. That was great. I put up another series called Deus Vult Wastelanders. I had an artist draft me up a little sketch of the character, some concept art, did a video, and I only asked for $1,500. I ended up more than tripling that budget, so I actually funded all 3 books plus some extra.
Oh, that's fabulous.
It's great. People, like I said, you take 2 things people love and you smash them together and you mention the things they love most. People explode and they can't get their wallet out of their pocket fast enough. It is what. So if you can figure out those things people love, do it. So my first book was already written. If anyone's thinking about doing a Kickstarter, I greatly suggest you write the first draft first. You don't have to edit it, but start your Kickstarter by being able to say the book is already written. That makes a
Ah,
huge difference to people, and it'll make a lot of difference to you because you don't want to be stressed sitting there while you're thinking about, I have to write this book, because that
right,
kills your inspiration real quick.
right, yeah.
So I did that. I asked for the money for a cover artist, for formatting, for the editor and proofreaders. I got everything I needed for all 3 books. It's going great. I got the funds. I've already paid everyone. It's moving along very. One mistake I made with my first book was setting the expected delivery date just a little bit too early. I only gave myself maybe 3 months. With this one, I gave myself about 6 months. I'm
Mhm,
actually hoping to have it out September, to be honest with you. I'd like to get it out way
mhm.
early, but
So how did you market the Kickstarter campaign? Like, where did you go to ask for money and how did you ask?
to be honest, it's all who you know. As long as
Uh-huh.
you can get people to talk about it online, get people to post it on their blogs. I just did the campaign. I recorded a 2-minute video. So I focused on why my books would be different. That's what people like. So I focused
Right.
on a problem in the genre. I
Mhm.
focused on how I was going to fix that problem in the genre. And then I talked about how my books are going to be awesome. And that seemed to do it. I had a 75% conversion rate from people who watched the video to people who backed the project.
Oh,
Um,
that's so great.
it is. So
Did you have help creating the video or you just did it all on your own?
I recorded it on my phone in my
Uh-huh.
basement and just
Ah,
talked at my phone for a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes, and that was it. It does not have to
wow,
be this huge production. It wasn't
wow.
edited.
Do you have a URL to that video that people can watch?
I probably do. If you just go on Kickstarter and just search Knight of the Blood Cross, that's Knight. If you just search Knight of the Blood Cross, you will find it. I'm also on there, Adam Lane Smith, as a creator. I've got both of them listed there. My first video, not so good. So the first video
Mhm,
was just me narrating dramatically, like the blurb that would be on the back of the book and how cool it was going to
mhm.
be. That didn't really take off as much. Talking about a problem in the genre that you see and how your book makes that genre so much better, that people grabbed a hold of a lot better. When you want
Oh,
to sell
that's
a product,
awesome.
focus on the problem and then focus on how you're solving the problem.
So there's no excuse for people if you don't have the money, because that's usually the number one thing is I don't have the money to publish my book. So,
Tell me about it. That's been my biggest problem. But this,
yeah.
people threw more money at me than I knew what to do with. So I had to keep making up new books to actually say, okay, well, I guess I'll do this, and now I'll do this, and then people would rally and say, hey, I'm going to throw $500. I had a good friend say, I'll throw $500 in and match anyone else who wants to put money in, and it just exploded out of control. So
Oh,
now I've got
that's
to put
fab.
out 3 books. In the last, let me think. That Kickstarter just finished about 2.5 weeks ago. I had the first book written when I started that book. I started the Kickstarter in the last in 4 or 5 weeks of just kind of working through the day and what hours I could. I wrote the second book. The third book is now 1/4 completed. So I've almost got the whole trilogy already written, and it's only been 6 weeks since the Kickstarter started.
That's fabulous. Have you ever done Kickstarter for nonfiction or just for your fiction?
Not yet, to be honest with you. Nonfiction seems easier because you don't have to worry about an editor so much. You don't have to worry about a good flow to the story. You don't have to worry about that. It's more just a good proofreader is all you really need. And I have a lot of family and friends that would just jump at the chance to read books in advance. Cover art is also not as bad for nonfiction because you don't need some awesome character on the front with
Right,
huge
right.
guns and explosions, which is what my covers look like. You don't want it to be flowers on a colorful background. That's about as bad as you can get for nonfiction. But you just drop $200-300 on a cover. You probably could kickstart a nonfiction, but it's
Yeah.
easier to kickstart. It's easier to get people's attention when it's something you can really hype. So if you can
Right.
hype your nonfiction in some way, again, list the problem, describe how your book fixes that problem, and how awesome your book's going to be, and why you should make this book, and why people would want it. You might get some money that way.
Good to know. Well, this has been really great. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything else you'd like to share?
Finish your first drafts. That's the best thing I can tell people. I have a lot of people that love writing, and a lot of people who tell me they're going to be authors, and they never finish their first drafts. I'm friends with them for 5-10 years, and I watch them struggle through their first draft, and I encourage them and say, why don't you just finish it? Here's some processes, and they can't wrap their head around that. If you can just finish your first draft, at that point it takes over. The urgency takes over, because then you say, I have this first draft of a book sitting here. I could be publishing this. And then the urgency and motivation just skyrockets.
Right. And if they need help, I have plenty of programs and tools to help them
Right.
do that.
Right. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. So how can people find your books? Where can they buy them if they want to buy them?
Well, I'm on Amazon. It's kind of tricky because my name is Adam Smith. And if you look for that on Amazon, you will find this old dead guy who wrote about capitalism. Or you'll find 10,000 copies of people writing about that guy. So if you search Adam Lane Smith, Lane, you're going to get my books. If you search Burrito Avenger, there are no other books titled Burrito Avenger. That will definitely find it. My website is adamlanesmith.com. I have all my books listed there, including some upcoming projects I haven't even published yet, just to kind of, again, build the hype. Kickstarter, everywhere.
That is so great. Thank you so much for sharing with us. This has been really, really good. I mean, I love learning, from other authors and what they're doing and things they're doing that I'm not doing, or, like I don't write fiction and I haven't done Kickstarter. So I appreciate you sharing with me.
Absolutely.
And with the audience.
Thank you for having me on. This was wonderful.
Yeah, you're welcome. So that wraps up another great episode of the Books Business Abundance podcast. To get the show notes, go to www.booksbusinessabundance.com/podcast. And to continue the conversation, you can go to www.facebook.com/groups/Books Business Abundance. That's where you can ask questions, delve deeper into today's topic, and share comments and takeaways. And you can also ask questions of my guest, and I will get them to him. So that's it. Bye-bye.